The recent developments in Dalton have stirred significant controversy, particularly surrounding Mayor Tiffany Henyard's leadership and her increasingly criticized tactics. At a recent village board meeting, Henyard announced a 30-day temporary appointment for several key positions in the community, including the police chief, village attorney, special counsel, and executive assistant. Many saw this move as a strategic attempt to generate sympathy in response to the growing public criticism of her administration. Political analyst Candace Owens was among the harshest critics of Henyard, accusing her of resorting to blackmail and unethical practices to retain her position. Owens publicly condemned the mayor for allegedly pressuring residents to either support her or remain silent about her actions, accusing her of using threats to withhold municipal services to those who defied her. She labeled these actions as clear abuses of power, emphasizing that any leader willing to engage in such behavior was unfit to lead. Henyard's administration has been plagued by a series of scandals, including ongoing lawsuits, which have only intensified the public's dissatisfaction with her. Owens pointed to Henyard's alleged use of intimidation tactics as part of a disturbing pattern of unethical conduct that has undermined trust within the community. She expressed concern over potential dangers of unchecked power, which she argued had led to the erosion of trust among Dalton residents. Owens also urged a full investigation into Henyard's alleged actions, warning of serious legal consequences. If the claims prove true, these allegations have sparked a significant outcry among Dalton's residents, many of whom felt empowered by Owens' remarks to call for change. The mayor's tactics, which were seen as coercive, had already alienated large segments of the community, and these new accusations only fueled the demand for accountability. Some residents even went so far as to suggest that Henyard should step down in light of the growing controversy. However, Henyard supporters have pushed back, arguing that she has been unfairly targeted. Some suggested that Owens' criticism was excessive and lacked concrete evidence, painting Henyard as a leader under unfair attack. Despite this, the mayor's administration continued to face mounting scrutiny, with public sentiment increasingly turning against her amid this political turmoil. Henyard made a public show of support for former President Donald Trump, congratulated him on his 2024 election victory. In her message, she praised Trump's historic comeback and called for unity in the face of political division, urging citizens to put our differences aside and work together. Her words seemed to signal an attempt to shift her political positioning, especially given the heightened tensions and public outcry surrounding her leadership. In Dalton, the timing of Henyard's post was especially striking, coming just an hour after Trump's victory was declared. Many found it surprising and perhaps opportunistic, as political leaders typically issue more formal, neutral congratulatory statements after an election. Henyard's enthusiastic praise for Trump stood in stark contrast to her previous political rhetoric, raising questions about her motivations. Was this a genuine expression of support, or was it a calculated move to align herself with a powerful figure to salvage her increasingly fragile political career? For many, the timing of Henyard's support for Trump appeared to be a strategic attempt to win favor and shift public opinion. Given the significant political and legal pressures she was facing, her embrace of Trump seemed designed to bolster her image in the eyes of voters who may have been disillusioned with her leadership. However, the irony of the situation was not lost on critics, who pointed out that Henyard's administration had been marred by accusations of corruption, coercion, and unethical conduct. The contrast between her efforts to align with Trump and her troubled leadership history in Dalton only added to the doubts surrounding her sincerity. Henyard's administration had been accused of suppressing dissent, silencing critics, and using underhanded tactics to maintain control. These allegations were seen as part of a larger pattern of behavior that prioritized her political survival over the well-being of Dalton's residents. Many residents had grown increasingly frustrated with Henyard's leadership, feeling that she was more concerned with maintaining her position than addressing the town's actual concerns. The situation was further complicated by the perception that Henyard's public support of Trump was a tactical maneuver rather than a genuine expression of unity. Critics argued that her sudden shift in tone was less about promoting cooperation and more about trying to align herself with a national figure in hopes of gaining political leverage. Henyard's embrace of Trump seemed to be a way of positioning herself with a powerful ally, perhaps hoping to draw strength from his influence as a way to weather the storm of growing criticism and legal challenges. Henyard's supporters, on the other hand, believed that her message was sincere and that she was simply trying to focus on the future, despite the obstacles she faced. They argued that, regardless of her past controversies, Henyard was attempting to move forward and work towards greater cooperation in Dalton. Still, many were skeptical, questioning whether her message of unity was truly about healing political divisions or whether it was simply a tactic to shield her administration from mounting criticism. The political climate in Dalton has become increasingly tense, with Henyard's leadership under constant scrutiny. Public opinion has swung sharply against her, with growing calls for her to step down in light of the ongoing scandals and allegations of corruption. Her attempts to align with Trump only added fuel to the fire, as many saw as an attempt to distract from her troubled leadership and legal issues as the political landscape in Dalton continues to evolve. Henyard's ability to maintain her grip on power remains uncertain. The accusations of blackmail, coercion, and unethical behavior have cast a long shadow over her political future, leaving many residents questioning her ability to lead effectively. The public's growing distrust of her administration, combined with her controversial tactics, has left her leadership in a fragile state. The situation in Dalton raises important questions about the role of power, accountability, and ethics in local leadership. With mounting pressure from residents, legal challenges, and political analysts like Candace Owens, Henyard's position is increasingly precarious. Her efforts to align with Trump may be seen as an attempt to bolster her reputation, but it remains to be seen whether this shift will be enough to restore her standing in the community. As tensions continue to rise, the future of Henyard's leadership in Dalton hangs in the balance. Mayor Tiffany Henyard's leadership in Dalton continues to spark intense debate and frustration, especially in light of her recent actions and ongoing controversies. Amidst accusations of corruption and power manipulation, Henyard's sudden and enthusiastic support for former President Donald Trump has raised eyebrows. Many are questioning whether her alignment with Trump is an attempt to shield herself from the mounting legal pressure she faces, including multiple lawsuits and federal investigations, or whether she is simply seeking validation from a politically influential figure. The timing of her post, celebrating Trump's victory in the 2024 election, seems calculated. Coming just after his win, Henyard's praise for Trump could be seen as an effort to curry favor with a powerful ally while deflecting attention from her troubled past. However, her history of divisive leadership and her tendency to control and exclude dissenting voices within her administration make it hard to believe her newfound call for unity is genuine. Henyard has long prioritized loyalty over collaboration, and her strained relationships with local officials and trustees further complicate the notion that she is capable of fostering real cooperation. Her political loyalties have also come under scrutiny. Henyard has historically identified as a Democrat, making her sudden, unabashed support for Trump appear opportunistic. Given Dalton's political landscape, her alignment with the Republican president feels like a strategic move rather than a sincere effort to unite the community. If Henyard truly wants to forge a bipartisan path, she will need to demonstrate more than just an online message of support. She will need to prove that she can engage in genuine cooperation, a skill she has thus far struggled to show. Henyard's political survival is further threatened by the increasing unrest in the community. Residents and local officials are growing disillusioned with her leadership, with many questioning her ability to lead effectively. Her administration has been mired in allegations of corruption, coercion, and ethical violations. The public's growing dissatisfaction has only intensified the pressure on Henyard, leaving her with few options for moving forward. Whether she can gain Trump's backing or her actions will only lead to further fallout remains to be seen. One thing is clear, however. Her attempt to present herself as a collaborative leader may be too little. Too late at a recent village board meeting, Henyard's leadership was once again called into question. The meeting, which was intended to be a space for open dialogue and decision-making, quickly spiraled into chaos. Instead of addressing important issues, such as security and budgeting concerns, Henyard prioritized control, stifling dissent and marginalizing any voices that didn't align with her own. The tension in the room became palpable as Henyard's handling of the meeting grew increasingly erratic. Her decision to exclude Trustee Kill from participating was seen as a deliberate move to assert dominance, effectively shutting down any attempt at civil discussion. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that Henyard was more concerned with maintaining her authority than addressing the town's needs. Of behavior during the meeting reflected a broader pattern of manipulation and self-interest that has defined her leadership. When Trustee Price failed to recognize Henyard's assumed authority, she doubled down on her petty power plays, disregarding any attempt at constructive conversation. The meeting, which should have been a forum for collaboration, instead became a stage for Henyard to reinforce her control over the proceedings. As the meeting degenerated further, Trustee Gonzalez chose to leave, unable to endure the increasingly hostile and unproductive environment. Instead of reflecting on the meeting's failure or considering alternative approaches, Henyard used Gonzalez's departure as an opportunity to inflate her ego. She positioned herself as a sole advocate for transparency and accountability, particularly concerning a forensic audit of Thorne Township's finances, an issue that already raised concerns about credit card misuse among trustees. Henyard's rhetoric took a sharp turn as she deflected blame for the meeting's chaos, scapegoating the IT department and framing Gonzalez's exit as an abandonment of responsibility. In doing so, she managed to shift the narrative away from her leadership failures and portray herself as the only one fighting for the community's best interests. This cynical move was yet another example of her manipulative tactics, aimed at deflecting criticism and consolidating power. By the time the meeting ended, it was clear that Henyard's approach to leadership had caused more harm than good. The meeting had ceased to be about problem-solving or collaboration. Instead, it had become a platform for Henyard to assert her dominance and control the narrative. Her actions left residents and trustees alike questioning whether she was capable of leading with integrity, or if her primary concern was maintaining her grip on power at all costs. The aftermath of the meeting highlighted a broader issue with Henyard's leadership style, one that values control and self-promotion over genuine collaboration and community engagement. Instead of working towards practical solutions for Dalton's pressing issues, Henyard has consistently prioritized her political survival. Disregarding the needs and concerns of the residents she is meant to serve as election season nears, the fallout from Henyard's actions will undoubtedly weigh heavily on her political future. The public is increasingly disillusioned with her leadership, and her divisive behavior during meetings only deepens a distrust that has been building for some time. Her recent attempts to align with Trump may have been an effort to shift the narrative in her favor, but it seems unlikely that a simple online post will be enough to overcome the growing backlash. Henyard's future as mayor, along with the future of Dalton, hangs in the balance. The community's ongoing dissatisfaction, coupled with the mounting legal challenges and ethical questions surrounding her administration, suggests that Henyard's political career may be nearing its end. The consequences of her leadership style will likely be felt long after the meetings and debates have ended, as voters begin to reflect on the dysfunction and lack of cooperation that have characterized her time in office. Whether she can recover or whether Dalton will chart a new course remains uncertain, but it's clear that Henyard's leadership has reached a tipping point. Mayor Tiffany Henyard's leadership in Dalton has descended into a spectacle of self-interest and manipulation, with each public meeting revealing more about her troubling approach to governance. What was supposed to be a forum for transparent discussion and problem-solving instead became a chaotic display of Henyard's increasingly autocratic style, driven by ego and a desperate need to maintain control over both the village board and the community at large. During a recent village board meeting, Henyard's behavior reached a new low. What began as a routine discussion quickly devolved into chaos as the mayor bulldozed through agenda items with little regard for order or the democratic process. Motions were ignored, and any attempt at civil discourse was met with Henyard's authoritarian demands that everyone comply without question. For those hoping for a thoughtful exchange of ideas or solutions to the pressing issues in Dalton, the meeting proved to be nothing but a frustrating and unproductive experience. Rather than focusing on the important matters at hand, Henyard took center stage, framing herself as a lone hero in a political drama. She delivered a nearly hour-long monologue in which she positioned herself as the only one truly working for the people of Dalton. She accused her critics of being self-interested and corrupt while painting herself as the misunderstood champion battling a system rife with inefficiency and dishonesty. One of the main issues she highlighted was the $2.2 million tax fund allocated for Thorne Township homeowners, which she claimed belonged to taxpayers. However, as her tirade stretched on, it became clear that her real focus wasn't on transparency or accountability. It was on securing her re-election and solidifying her political power. Henyard's rhetoric seemed designed not to address community concerns, but to fabricate a narrative in which she was the only leader capable of protecting the people from a corrupt system. She accused anyone who disagreed with her or left the meeting of being part of a hate group, labeling them as disruptive forces working to undermine the meeting's purpose. This behavior wasn't just disruptive, it was a blatant attempt to control the narrative and silence dissent. Henyard, in her mind, was the martyr, while anyone who opposed her was an enemy of the people. This behavior only further alienated the community, as the public became weary of the spectacle. They hadn't signed up for a political drama. They wanted leadership. They wanted someone who would listen to their concerns, someone capable of addressing the real issues facing Dalton, not a mayor who viewed every disagreement as a personal attack and every argument as a battle for survival. Henyard's self-aggrandizing rhetoric and manipulation left little room for meaningful discussion, and residents began to lose confidence in her ability to lead effectively. Meanwhile, Trustee Carol, caught in the middle of Henyard's chaos, struggled with her position, uncertain about her next steps. Carol felt bound by her responsibilities to the township, but Henyard's erratic behavior had made it nearly impossible for her to fulfill her duties in any meaningful way. Instead of working collaboratively with her fellow board members, Carol found herself stuck in a long list of finger-pointing exercises with little time or opportunity for actual problem-solving. The meeting, which should have been about tackling Dalton's challenges, had become a forum for Henyard to further her agenda. As tensions grew, the atmosphere in the meeting became increasingly toxic. The public forum, which should have been a platform for civil discourse and transparent decision-making, had devolved into a stage for Henyard's manipulation and self-promotion. Rather than addressing the issues at hand, Henyard was more interested in securing her position of power, regardless of the damage it caused to her relationships with trustees and residents. Her actions undermined the trust of both her colleagues and the community, making it painfully clear that her political survival took precedence over the well-being of Dalton. The longer Henyard's leadership continued, the more her reputation soured. What was once a community where open dialogue and democratic processes were valued now seemed on the verge of complete dysfunction. Henyard's disregard for the democratic process and her increasingly autocratic approach to leadership left many wondering if any meaningful progress could be made under her tenure. As the meeting continued to spiral, it became clear that her actions were not just damaging to the board's functioning, but to the community's faith in the entire system of governance. Her focus on protecting her position was evident in her willingness to manipulate every situation to her advantage. The $2.2 million tax fund issue became less about serving the public interest and more about her re-election campaign. She framed herself as a lone advocate for transparency, accusing anyone who disagreed with her of being part of a larger opposition to the community's welfare. This rhetoric, while dramatic, was ultimately an exercise in political self-preservation rather than leadership for the good of the people. By positioning herself as a victim in a political struggle, Henyard not only diminished the credibility of her critics, but also alienated those who had once supported her. The public began to see through her manipulative tactics, and as more residents spoke out in frustration, the growing sense of disillusionment became impossible to ignore. The question on everyone's mind was whether Henyard's leadership could be salvaged or if the community would continue to suffer under her increasingly divisive and self-serving style. The board meeting itself, which could have been an opportunity for growth and cooperation, instead highlighted the deep dysfunction at the heart of Henyard's leadership. Rather than facilitating productive discussions, Henyard's authoritarian approach stifled debate and left her colleagues frustrated and alienated. Trustee Carol, struggling to navigate her role within the board, found herself constantly defending her actions rather than contributing to meaningful policy decisions. As Henyard's behavior escalated, so did the sense of frustration within the board and the community. The mayor's desperate need for control had turned every issue into a battle for political survival, and the integrity of the entire board was compromised. Civil discourse, transparency, and collaboration, values that should have been at the core of Dalton's leadership, were all but forgotten. Instead, Henyard's actions created an environment of mistrust and division, leaving little hope for the kind of positive change that Dalton desperately needed. Henyard's leadership, once seen as an opportunity for change, had become a case study of how unchecked power can corrode a leader's ability to serve the public. Her disregard for the democratic process, her manipulation of the narrative, and her relentless pursuit of personal power left the community in disarray. With tensions running high and residents increasingly vocal about their dissatisfaction, Henyard's future as mayor seemed more uncertain than ever. At the root of it all was Henyard's singular focus on self-preservation. Rather than working to serve the community, she was more concerned with securing her re-election and maintaining her grip on power. In doing so, she alienated the very people she was supposed to represent. The public's growing frustration with her leadership had reached a breaking point, and it was unclear whether any amount of political maneuvering could repair the damage she had done. Dalton's future now hangs in the balance, as the community grapples with the fallout from Henyard's actions. The public forum that could have been an opportunity for progress had become a platform for political gamesmanship, leaving the residents to wonder whether their voices would ever truly be heard. With each passing day, Henyard's credibility as a leader continues to diminish, and the likelihood of meaningful change under her administration becomes more and more remote. The question now is whether Dalton will be able to chart a new course, or if it will remain mired in dysfunction under a leadership driven by ego and manipulation.